So in the last lesson, we understood about the virtual network. So how we can create virtual networks and other things. So in this lesson, we'll understand how we can apply the network security groups at the virtual network level. So as we understand in the last lesson, so within the Azure subscription, we can have multiple virtual networks. Under a region, we can have a multiple virtual networks. So one subscription can have multiple virtual networks. Under one single region, we can have multiple virtual networks. So each and every virtual network can have multiple subnets. So the virtual network is basically a private network in Azure. So under that, we can basically to segregate the servers or to segregate the environment, we create a subnet to achieve the security and everything. So by default, when we create a virtual network with a subnets, so by default, all the subnets can communicate with each other and there's no restrictions between the subnets. So if we are creating a resources like virtual machines or any other resources, if there are no security controls applied at the resource level, and by default, all the resources will communicate with all the resources. So now network security group, as we understand in one of these lessons in virtual machines also, is basically a list of security rules. So that can allow or deny the inbound or outbound traffic. The security group is basically just like a firewall. So which can be applied at various places. So in the one of the lessons in the Azure virtual machine, we understood that how network security group can be applied to a virtual machine NIC and how we can control the traffic at a NIC level. Now, similarly, the security group is basically network security group is just a security rules. So which consist of allow and deny rules. Now, based on these rules, so it is going to allow or deny the traffic based on the priority of the rule. So you have inbound rules and we have an outbound rules. So we can define the allow or a deny both in the inbound and outbound rules. So based on the requirement, we can basically create and allow rules or a deny rules, and we can basically restrict or allow the communication from the sources. Now, the network security groups can be applied at the subnet level. So let's understand how basically it can be helpful. So I'm just taking in a virtual network. So we'll just take a virtual network. So I'm considering this. So Azure virtual network, which is, I'm just taking 19.168.1.0/24. So, and let's take somewhere in basically called as the central India as the region of it. So within this particular one, so we have a subnets, subnet 1, subnet 2, and subnet 3. A subnet 1, so I'm giving it a subnet's name. So I'm giving the name as I'm called as an web servers. Web servers. Subnet. Subnet. So I'm giving an IP space called as 192 168.1.0 slash, I would say, call this one 255.255.255.248. Or I can say call this in 248. Now this is one subnet. And I'm taking another subnet, which is an app server. The subnet which starts from 16.0 and this one. I'm taking another subnet, a database server subnet, which starts from 32.0. So like this, under a virtual network, we can have a multiple subnets. So internally within the Azure virtual network, so we can call there is a router, a router, router. And all these subnets are connected to this particular router. All these subnets are connected to this router. So now this router by default will route the traffic between all these subnets. By default, all the subnets communicate with each other. It means that the VM or a resource, I'm just taking a VM1, a VM2, or a VM3, which are sitting in a web server, the subnet, can communicate with the app server's VMs, which are available in app servers. And all the subnets which are there in the DB servers. Let's say there are some virtual machines running SQL applications in DB subnets. Now, so let's assume that we have deployed some virtual machines in the individual subnets. Now, by default, the virtual machines or the resources which exist in the web server subnet communicate with web servers, and app servers subnet can communicate with the DB, and there's no restrictions between the subnets within the virtual network. Virtual network. Now, what is my requirement here is in now. Now, first requirement is in, so no internet access for the database VMs. Database VMs. So I don't want an internet access for the database VMs and basically for the entire DB subnet. DB subnet. So in future, if I deploy a few more virtual machines within the DB subnet, I don't want an internet access for these VMs. Any VM which is deployed in the database subnet, they should not get access to the internet. Now, second kind of a requirement is in app servers. App server resources should not be accessible from internet. App server subnet resources. So the virtual machines are any resource which is residing in the app servers These should not be accessible from internet, even though a public IP is being assigned to the virtual machines. So I don't want any of these resources to be accessible from internet, even though there is a public IP assigned. Then the other thing is then the web servers should not communicate with a database or a DB subnet resources. So the DB subnet should accept the communication from only app servers subnet. So what is that I'm talking about? The resources which reside in the web server should not communicate with the resources which exist in the database subnet, because the web servers are exposed to the internet. So I don't want these resources to directly communicate with the database servers. The web servers can communicate with app servers. Similarly, the DB subnet should accept the communication from only app servers subnet. Now this DB subnet, the resources which reside inside this subnet should accept communication only from app servers. So any communication from web servers should be denied of it. So how we can achieve it? Now one is that we can have one security group applied at the subnet level. A network security group, we can apply a network security group at the subnet levels. We can create one single network security group and map this network security group to all the 3 subnets. And this network security group can have all these rules, whether they allow or deny rules, defined in this one. Or we can have a different network security groups for different subnets. We can have a different security groups for different subnets. So we can have a different network security group of web servers. We can have a different network security group for app servers. We can have a different network security group for database subnet. And we can create the allow rules and deny rules in the individual subnets. So based on need to need basis, so either you can go with a single network security group and create the allow and deny rules. Accordingly, the communication can be restricted. Or if you feel that, okay, managing the allow and bound resources in one single network security group is difficult, then you can have an individual network security groups created for individual subnets and which can be applied. But it all depends on the priority which you are defining it. Now, the network security group has inbound rules and outbound rules, which has a priority. The least number is the highest priority. The highest number is the least priority. If the first rule says an allow, then if the condition is satisfying that, then it allows that. It doesn't validate the subsequent rules. If the first rule is matching the traffic, then it's basically going to allow the traffic. If the first rule is not matching, then it goes to the second rule. in the priority. Okay. So based on the rules priority, the network security group is going to validate and going to allow or deny the traffic to the entire subnet. Now, as we are applying the network security group at the subnet level, any traffic which is coming into the subnet, first, it has to pass through this network security group before it is being forwarded to the resources like virtual machines. If you have denied a traffic at a subnet level, and if you have allowed a traffic at a VM level, if this resources are basically communicating with this one, as there is a deny rule at the subnet level, it is going to block the traffic at a subnet level. So the packet or a traffic data will not go to the VM level, even though you have allowed at the VM level, because any traffic which is entering into the subnet, first the network security group should allow, which is applied at the subnet level, then the traffic can go to the VM levels. Otherwise, it doesn't go through that. Similarly, when you have an outbound rule, you allow the traffic at a VM level. You allowed the traffic at a VM level, but you denied the traffic at a network security group, which is applied at the subnet level. Now, what happens in this case is that the packet may come out from the virtual machine, but as there is a deny rule at the NSG, it is going to block the traffic. It means the packet will not go out from the subnet itself. So when you are creating your rules, you need to be very careful that where you are applying that rule and where that NSG is being applied. So if you have an NSG applied and at an individual VM level, there is let's say there is an NSG which is being applied at an individual VM level, an NSG at an individual VM level. Now this NSG might be allowing the traffic or denying the traffic. Now this NSG which is being applied at the individual resource level, that VM level, will also filter the traffic. Now there is an allow rule in the NSG which is applied at a subnet level, but there is a deny rule at the NSG which is being applied at the VM level. Now what happens? The packet may pass through this NSG. When the packet is being entering into the virtual machine NIC, the NSG which is at the VM level will validate whether it has been allowed or denied. If it is allowed, then it allows. If it is denied, then basically it is going to deny the traffic at an individual VM level. So we need to define, we need to be very careful when we are creating a network security groups and where we are applying it, what rules are being available. The network security groups rules are being allowed, basically validated. Inbound traffic, look inbound network security rules by policy. First, it sees that how many rules are available, what is the priority. Get the first rule based on the priority. A rule matches, the traffic rule matches, yes. Is it a deny rule or an allow rule? If it is a deny rule, it drops the packet. If it is allow rule, then it allows the packet. If the first rule is not matching, then it goes to load next rule. So if there are 10 rules in the NSG, the second priority rule will be loaded. Then condition matches, then it goes to the, basically condition matches, then it goes to the verify. Is there a last rule or basically deny or listen? If there is a deny rule, then it goes to drop the packet. If it is not a deny rule, then it allows the packet. Rule matches, no. Then it goes to the last rule. Is it a last rule? No. Then load the next rule, then come back, then validate until it matches the last rule. In the last rule, it checks. Yes, the last rule in the NSG is basically drop the packet. So that is basically going to drop the packet. So based on requirement, you need to create NSGs and apply the rules of it. So now what I'm going to do in this is, So I have a virtual networks. So in the virtual networks, we have VNet production, which is being deployed in central India. And we see a subnets, web server, app servers, database servers. Now, when I go to subnets, so we don't see any network security group attached. There is no security group attached. So first, let me create 3 virtual machines in 3 different subnets. So I'm going to the virtual machines. Right. So we'll create 3 virtual machines in this network. So I'm just going to the virtual machines. Let me create Azure virtual machine. So I'm giving it web VM, Central India. That's all. I'm selecting the default Windows Server 2019 data center. I'm selecting 2 CPUs with 8 GB RAM. So I'm going to the network. So I'm selecting the VNet production. So I'm selecting the web server. So I'm assigning a public IP to this VM and network security group basic, basically for this particular VM. Review and create. So I just created one VM and connect it to a web server subnet. So we'll connect another VM, connect to the app server subnet. So I'm giving it VM called as an app VM1. So I'm going to the network. I'm selecting the production VNet. I'm selecting app server subnet. I'm assigning a public IP to the VM. Create a virtual machine. So I initiated a creation of virtual machine in app VM. That is app server subnet. I'm going to create a database VM and connect to the database subnets. DB VM1. So I'm going to the network. I'm selecting VNet production. I'm selecting the database servers. Rest all I'm leaving it as it is the default settings. And I'm just saying create. So I initiated 3 virtual machines. into 3 different subnets within the virtual network. Let's wait for these 3 VMs gets created. So now we have 2 VMs up and running, and we have a database VM which just needs to get created. Okay. So let me go to the web VM. So when I select the web VM, there is a public IP. So I'm just taking the public IP. Now from the internet, so this is a virtual network. And within the virtual network, we have these 3 subnets. Let me copy the same, this thing. Now, this is internet, and this is my PC. So this is my laptop. So from my laptop is connected to an internet. And these machines having a public IP connected to the internet. So these machines are having the public IP, and they're also part of the internet. So during the creation of the virtual machines, so we selected a public IP. So from here, I'm trying to access this VMs as a first test. So I'm just selecting the first VM. So I'm able to access the web VM. So let me go to the app VM. So I'm able to access the app server VM. So I'm going to connect the DB VM. So as we would see from the internet, we are able to access all the 3 virtual machines, and there are no NSGs applied to the subnets. So now what I'm going to do is, so I'm going to create a NSG and apply an NSG to this particular subnet. We can have one single subnet apply to the multiple subnets and create a rules, or we can have individual subnets for individual subnets and individual NSGs for individual subnets. Okay. So for easy understanding purpose, so I'm going to make three different NSGs. So one for web servers, one for app servers, one for DB servers. Okay. So I'm just creating a web NSG, web-NSG, NSG. So let's go to the networks security groups. So I'm creating a security group under this subscription. Let me create NSGs. So I'm giving it web NSG as the name of the security group. Create it. When we go to the an individual VM level, first we'll see a VM. So I'm going to the web VM. I'm going to the network settings. So I go to the network interface card. Network security group. So there is a security group called as an web VM NSG. Now this VM has a network security group at the individual VM level. Now there is an NSG applied at a VM level, which is web VM NSG level. Now we created another NSG group, NSG, but still we didn't attach to the subnet. We just created an NSG. But during the creation of the virtual machine, it created an NSG and attached that NSG to this VM. So when we go to the NSG VM rules, so by default, there is a rule called as an inbound rule. RDP 3389 is allowed from anywhere. Is allowed from anywhere. So as there is no network security group here, the security group which is connected on the VM has a rule says called as an RDP, allow from anywhere. That is the reason why from this laptop, I'm able to access this particular VM. So now what I'm trying to do here now, so I'm going to edit this NSG. Now what I'm trying to do is, so I'm going to the web NSG which we created, and we would see called as inbound security rules. By default, there is a rule which is inbound allowed from a virtual network. There is a traffic allowed from a load balancer. And the last rule is in deny all. So I'm creating a rule here. I'm creating a rule here. So by default, okay, source from anywhere, any port, destination, any. I'm saying service HTTP. So let me say port 80. Priority, I'm giving it 200. Add it. So we just created a rule saying that allow port number 80 from anywhere. So we just created an inbound rule. but we didn't apply this rule, NSG to a network security group. So I'm going to the web server VM. Let me install in a web server. So we have the web server installed. Let me go to the VM. So let me go to the browse. Let me http:// the IP address. So now we are not able to access the port number 80. So what is happening here now? We created an NSG, we allowed here, but we have not applied this NSG to this subnet. Second reason, the NSG which is being applied to the individual VM level is allowed only RDP, but not 80 port number. So now what if the traffic is coming to this particular VM? The NSG which is here is blocking the traffic. So I'm going to this NSG, the virtual machine NSG. I'm creating a port rule, inbound rule. I'm saying 80, add. So what we did here now, so I allowed a port number 80 in the NSG, which is being applied to the VM. But still we haven't applied the NSG at the subnet level. Now let me go to this VM browser. Let me check now. Yeah. Now we see that we are able to access HTTP port. Now I'm going to the subnet. So I'm going to the web server subnet. So as of now, we don't see any NSG. So I'm attaching an NSG, the one which we created, web NSG. Save it. Now we applied NSG to the subnet. Now there are two NSG applied. One is at the VM level, one is at the subnet level. Now when a traffic is coming to this VM inbound, first it has to cross the subnet level NSG. Then only the packet can be forwarded to the VM level NSG. Now in both the NSGs, we have 80 port number allowed. So we attached NSG. Now let's go back, copy this. Let me go to the incognito window and paste it. So now we are able to access the port number H80. Now what I'm trying to do here now. So I'm going to the NSG, which is applied at the subnet level. I'm deleting this allow rule. So I'm deleting this particular rule. So now we are not allowing the port number 80 from anywhere. So as the traffic coming from internet, first it has to pass the subnet level NSG. But in the subnet level NSG, there is no 80 traffic is allowed. So it is going to block over here itself. So let's do a test. Let's wait for some time. It might be in a cache. Yeah, looks like it is blocked now. It took some time. Let's check from any other browser. Let's go to the Edge. Let me paste it here. Because in the Chrome, it hasn't cache. Now we can see that can't reach this page. So what exactly happening here now? We didn't allow the port number 80 here. I'm just disconnecting the RDP. Now there is no RDP is also allowed. Now I'm not able to do an RDP to this VM. I'm not able to access the web server here because the NSG which is sitting at the subnet level doesn't have any inbound rules. So when I go to the subnet level, so I don't see any rules allow. These are only from virtual network and load balancer. So now what I'm trying to do here now, I'm going to add two rules. I'm saying 3389, allow. The rule number I'm saying 300. I'm creating one more rule, port number 80. Now I created two rules in the web NSG, which is applied at the subnet level. Now what happened here now? We allowed the RDP and port number 80 here. And also we allowed port number 80 and RDP on the VM NSG. So we allowed the RDP and as well as HTTP traffic on both the NSGs. Now from my laptop, the traffic will pass through the subnet NSG. Then it verifies by the VM level NSG. Then it is being allowed. Then the traffic of the packet will be forwarded here. Now let me go and do a refresh. It would take a bit of time, basically a minute of time to apply the rules. Yeah. Now we can see that the traffic is coming in. Let me go and check the RDP. Now I'm able to access the RDP. Okay. So now from outside, I'm able to access the HTTP server and able to access the RDP of this machine. So I'm going to the subnet. I'm going to the subnet, the app server subnet. So we are going to create one more NSG, which I'm calling it as an app subnet NSG. NSG. However, there is an individual VM level, that is app VM, whatever subnet, the app VM NSG or something which we created. So let me go to the second VM, which is app VM1. Go to network settings. Here we can see there is a network security group, app VM NSG, and RDP is being allowed. Is being allowed. Now what I'm trying to do here is now. So I'm going to create a new NSG. Network security groups. So I'm creating a network security group. I'm saying app subnet -NSG, app subnet -NSG. Okay. So now I have this one created. So let me go to the subnet. App servers and assign the app subnet NSG, save it. So now we create an app server subnet and we apply it over here. Now this app subnet does not have any rules. So by default, all the incoming traffic from internet is restricted, denied. So when we go to this rule, app server NSG, the inbound rules. So there is no traffic allowed from internet or from anywhere. Within the virtual network, the traffic is being allowed. From a load balancer network, the traffic is allowed. But from the internet, there is no traffic allowed. Now, as soon as I apply the NSG at a network security group, so all the inbound and outbound rules will be applied at the subnet level. Now I'm trying to do here now. Let me check the app VN public IP. Now, (109). Let me do an RDP to 109. I should not be able to do it because I'm trying to do an RDP to the VM, but in the NSC, there is no inbound rule to allow RDP. Now the packet comes here. This NSG is dropping the RDP packets. This NSG is basically dropping the packets. As you see, I'm not able to connect. Now, similarly, what I'm trying to do is then I'm going to create a database subnet NSG. Database NSG. So let me go to the network security groups. I'm saying database subnet NSG. Create. Okay. Now let me go to the virtual network subnet. I'm going to the database subnet. I'm selecting the database subnet security group. So let's go to this subnet security group. So now we don't see any inbound rules from the internet. Now this VM is having an individual NSG. It could be a database DBVM -NSG. But at the subnet level, there are no inbound rules. Now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to do an RDP to this machine. I should not be able to access the now we would see that we were not able to access these VMs which are there in app server subnet and DB server subnet. The reason is on these subnet level now. So if I create a one more VM into the subnet with the public IP, but as there is an NSC which is blocking the traffic at the subnet level, so we'll still not be able to access that particular VM. Now, what could be our requirement here now? So no internet access for the database VMs for the entire subnet. So all the VMs which are created in database subnet, they should not be able to access the internet. Now, I'm able to log into the VM of web VM. So by default, there is a communication within the subnets, within the network. So from this VM, I can access this VM. Now let me take the private IP of this VM. I'm going to the database VM to the private IP address of this VM is 132. So from this VM, I'm trying to log in this VM. Now, if you see that inside the web server VM, I'm able to communicate with because there are no restrictions by default between the subnets within the same virtual network. Now, what is my requirement here now? No internet access for the database VMs or for the entire subnet. I'm going to this database VM. First, let me check whether there is an internet access or not. Let me open the Edge. Open an Edge. I'm trying to type www.google.com. Yeah, I'm able to get into this one. I'm saying www.acutelearn.com. So I'm able to get internet access on the database VM. Now the requirement is that I don't want an internet access for these VMs. Now when I go here now, in future, any VMs which are going to deploy it, all the VMs should not have internet access. So instead of applying the restrictions at the individual NSG level, so we can apply the restrictions at the subnet level NSG. Now I'm going to the NSG. I'm going to the NSG at database NSG. Now what is the traffic here now? These VMs should not go out to the internet. So it is an outbound rule. So I'm going to the NSG. I'm going to the outbound rule. So by default, we see the all outbound is being allowed to the internet. The internet is being allowed. Now what I'm trying to create is I'm creating a source from anywhere. Source for destination, a service tag. I'm saying to internet. To internet. Now we can have pre-configured these things. So I'm saying internet. Custom, I'm saying destination port range star. Any traffic. I'm saying deny. 400 rule. So what I'm trying to create here is from any source, from any of the virtual machines in this subnet to destination called as an internet, I'm creating a rule called as a deny rule. Deny rule. So I'm saying add, which is priority called as a 400. Now the 400 priority comes first, then 65,001. So as per the NSG, so this as soon as this rule gets matched, the packets will get dropped. Now let me go to the database VM. Now let me browse through it would take just a minute to get the rules applied. Let's wait for some time. Still. Because we denied to the internet. So we should not get internet on the database VM. Still we are getting. Oh, sorry. We applied the rules on the web NSG. That's what I'm saying. We have to apply it on a database. So I'm going to the database NSG. I'm applying a rule destination service tag to internet. I'm saying all the traffic. I'm saying deny 400. Now let me go to the database VM. Let me try to navigate. Now we would see that we are not able to load the pages. Now we can see we cannot reach this page. This is something in the cache. Okay. Now what we did is in the outbound rule of a database subnet, we applied internet access denied. So anything outbound to the internet, we denied at this level. Now app server subnet resources should not be accessible from internet. So these resources, the any VMs which are here, they should not be accessible from internet. Already we don't have an RDP rule allowed. We don't have an RDP rule allowed. So nothing will be, basically the RDP will not be accessible from here, anything. Web server should not communicate with DB subnet. Now from here, VM, we are trying to communicate with database VM. But these web servers should not communicate with database VM. So any virtual machines which are sitting in this subnet should not communicate with this one. So I'm going to the database subnet, the inbound rules. Let me go to the subnet. Let me get the subnet series. /26 DB subnet inbound rules. So I'm creating a deny rule. Source from this particular subnet IP addresses, any source port range, destination to any of the virtual machine, any traffic. I'm saying deny. I'm giving it 410 rule, deny. So there are two ways which can be achieved. One is that we can go to the web NSG and we can restrict the outbound rule to these destinations from all these VMs, or we can go to this NSG and we can restrict it based on the inbound rules from these sources. See, if I'm creating a rule in the web subnet, I'm going to apply an outbound rule. If I'm going to apply restrictions, I'm going to in the database network security group, then I'm going to apply the inbound. So it's all up to us. So I applied at the database level. So I'm just disconnecting this VM. I'm trying to connect this VM again. I should not be able to access it. So what I'm trying to do here, I'm already on this particular VM. From this VM, I'm trying to access this particular VM. Earlier, I was able to access it because there were no deny rules at the subnet level. I was able to communicate. So as I applied restrictions to the entire this subnet on the database inbound rules, now any traffic coming from these virtual machines within this subnet will not be able to communicate with this subnet. Now I see I cannot communicate with this particular VM of it. Okay. So this how it basically gets the NSGs gets implemented and how we can achieve security. And we can see database subnet should accept the communication from only app server subnet. So we want to allow the communication only from here. So we can also define the inbound rules by default as we created it in these things there. Now what I'm trying to do here now. So within the inbound rule, already there is a traffic which is being allowed from anywhere, allowed from virtual network. So what happens now? There is a deny from the web servers and allow from everywhere else. So basically by default, it allows from app servers to DB servers. But tomorrow, if you create a one more, a subnet, and that subnet also can communicate with DB subnet because we restricted only from the web servers subnet. But your requirement is only the database subnet should not communicate with any other subnets. Any other subnet should not access the database. Only app servers will know. Now, in that case, you can explicitly apply your rules. So what happens? I'm trying to create an additional rule. So I'm saying called as an this is a database. So let me go to the a subnet. Let me go to the NSG. Now 410 is the priority rule. So I'm saying add from any source to any destination, any protocol. I'm saying deny. I'm saying rule number. I'm saying 400. I'm saying anything is denied. If anything is denied, a priority of 400. Now, when I define this 400, inbound anything from restriction. Now, the web servers will also not be able to communicate with the database servers. App servers also will not be able to communicate with DB servers. So in future, if I create a one more subnet, that subnet also will not be able to communicate with the database. But what is our requirement here? Only app server should communicate. Rest other subnets should not communicate with a database. So what I'm trying to do here now, I'm going to create a priority rule. Source IP addresses. I'm saying 1.0/26. Sorry, 64. I'm saying from app server subnet, allow anything which is a priority called as an 350. So I'm giving a priority as a 350. So now we see that from a specific IP subnet, we are allowing, which is a priority 350. And there is a priority with a number 400, which is deny everything. Deny everything. So what happens in this case? If a traffic is coming from this particular IP series, then it allows. Apart from that, if the traffic is coming anything from any other subnet, it is going to block as per to the NSG priority. So this way, what happens is that the NSG plays a crucial role at the subnet level, so that a Windows administrator creates a virtual machine in this subnet, but still, as the security rules are being applied at the subnet level, even though if it tries to modify the VM level, but the communication will not happen because you have a restrictions at the subnet level, at the subnet level. So that's how we can implement the NSGs at the subnet level, and we can achieve the security, and controls can be implemented to have a better control on the communication. Right. So in the next lesson, we will try to understand the peering between the virtual networks.